Okay, so hi everyone. So as Sarah explained, I'm going to step in for Heather today, and I'm going to quickly run through her talk on water governance and innovation and problems in the water sector. So when we think about the water sector, it's easy to forget just how complex that is. We might often just think of water companies, which include water and sewage and water-only plants. There's about 35 water companies in the UK, and of these, only about 12 of them are actually joint water, drinking water and sewage treatment. So then we also have many of the suppliers involved in the processes, so technology and construction, so people such as engineering, construction industries, and then also all the other utility services that are involved in the water sector. So for example, 2% of all of the UK's energy consumption actually goes towards providing for the water sector, so it's obviously a huge portion of that industry. Then we have the regulators, so people such as Ofwat, who is the economic regulator. We have the Drinking Water Quality Inspectorate. The Environment Agency have to keep all of the regulations in place and to ensure that everybody's operating in a manner in which they should be. Then we have local authorities, so these are responsible for the planning and development, also for flood management and those kind of aspects around the water system. And for example, they need to ensure that when development is in place, that that we need to consider how water is supplied to these places. So for example, by 2045, there's anticipated to be an additional 1 million homes in the London area, and they need to ensure that actually water is provided suitably and sewage treatment for these places. Then we also need to consider other land and water users, so agricultural sector, for example, who are direct abstractors and who are actually in competition with water companies for the availability of resources. Other industries such as breweries, we need to consider how much they're actually taking out of the system, and according to the Environment Agency, they're going to have to start to cut abstractions in order to make sure that there's enough of resources available. And it's often easy to forget about this. We also need to consider what other industries are involved and how to respond to what other land users are doing. So for example, slug pesticide is found in about 1 in 8 water sources, and although this is not seen as a problem by the industry, obviously perceptions around this are not good, and water companies have to try and manage the behaviours of agricultural sector, for example, who are using these products and how it impacts on their business. Then finally, we have the general public, who consists of our customers, voters and taxpayers, and customers actually have quite a big say of what it go by the evidence-based findings. They want to ensure that water companies are responding to what it is that the customers want, and that they're happy with what's being provided. And we also need to consider voters and taxpayers. For example, some people want renationalisation of water sector, and that's obviously going to have a big influence. For example, with regard to customers, then Anglian Water have had over 500,000 customer interactions, which have informed their most recent business plan. So we really need to pay lots of attention to what customers want. However, the water sector is not just about drinking water and flooding. We also need to consider sewage treatment and wastewater treatment plants. So we can see from the graphic here that from the current capacity, by 2050, we are going to need additional resources. At the minute, we are managing, but there will be a shortage as we see over time, especially with the increased growth around the London area, for example. You can see Beckton water treatment plant there, and you can see how it was in 1945. It was quite a sparse site, but up until 1999, you can see it's been expanded and expanded more again in 2017. And when this treatment plant was developed, it was outside of London, but because of development now, it is quite very much surrounded by buildings, and there is no more room for development. So once this final development is expanded to its capacity, there will be nowhere else to go. So we need to think about how we can deal with that. Do we decentralise water treatment? Can we put in more water treatment services much further out of the city, which will involve complicated pipelines and possibly severe infrastructure issues? Or do we look to more innovative solutions such as neighbourhood treatment systems, household level treatment systems, and things that are more upcoming and innovative responses to these kind of challenges? Because we need to really think about how we're going to manage the population growth when we have limitations such as these. So there are many innovative solutions, but they also raise governance challenges, unfortunately. So, for example, water firms who can't say no to new housing developments. So these are two distinct areas, but they don't seem to have very good links or work together with each other very well. And water companies really both want and need more influence over where and how the development happens, because they unfortunately have to supply to whoever is in the area, in their catchment area, and they get little control over this. So this is a big issue in places that are suffering, that are drought areas, or which will in the future have increased drought issues, because it will be a real challenge to supply. And if planning authorities are putting up hundreds and thousands of houses that are then needed to be supplied to, it's going to cause a real issue with water shortages. So then, as David was mentioning earlier about the SUDs, the sustainable drainage systems, they offer quite a good solution for some of these issues, to slow rainwater down with some green infrastructure such as plants and ponds and wetlands. However, as we see, a lack of guidance from the government has led to an environment of inconsistency in the implementation of SUDs. So poor management. We need to figure out how to get developers to use these. There needs to be some kind of guidance on how we can get this to be, on regulation around this, and what happens long term. There needs to be some guidelines in place around this. Nobody seems to have the answers for this, and questions around maintenance, for example. Who maintains these systems? Should it be something that's done at a community level? Is it local authority? And all these things need to be answered and to be put in place so that there's something more solid there for people to look to. Then we've got smart metering, which is obviously seen as quite a useful innovation. But is the UK ready for a smart revolution on this? It brings loads of benefits. We get lots of good, really valuable data from these systems, but introducing these has raised some challenges also about privacy and, do people actually want this? And with current privacy laws and GDPR and regulation, that there needs to be some careful consideration about how these might be used and implemented in the future to keep everybody happy. And then finally, some solutions such as water reuse and recycling. Headlines like this obviously don't do anything for public perceptions, but so it's a good solution, but there are also, again, some gaps in governance here. There's gaps in quality regulations which need to be improved upon, and also the issue here is that water recycling and water reuse sits across drinking water and sewage sectors, but these are separate companies, and they're not joined up very well, so this makes the process of trying to implement something like this a bit more slow and complicated than necessary. So these are some of the issues that are likely to be faced. Perfect. So in conclusion then, what we need to do is to have more integrated approaches for managing water in the built environment, and ones in particular that incorporate systems thinking approaches for the entire water cycle. For example, integrated urban water management strategies, IWA principles for water-wise cities, water-sensitive urban design are all approaches which should be looked at. And with regards to stakeholders, especially water companies and those in the development industry, we need to be more proactive and not just reactive to societal trends. We need water companies and planners and developers all working together and coming up with solutions and to kind of guide people. And we have this quote here: if we asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So we need to not ask the customers, but to maybe go to them with solutions and suggestions first, and try and guide towards more sustainable and more realistic solutions. Okay, thank you.